Hello friends and welcome back to another how-to series. In this video we're going to be going over in Gunbreaker. Let's quickly break down what Gunbreaker is. Gunbreaker is a tank and it is a bit of an in-between tank. It's pretty good at main tanking and it's also okay at off tanking. I would honestly put this in place as a main tank if there isn't a warrior, but if there is a warrior, of course put the warrior main tank instead. It does really high damage, one of the highest damage tanks, not the highest but one of the highest damage tanks. It has pretty good mitigation to stand its ground. Its utility is okay, it's not the best utility out of all the tanks, but it is a pretty good utility. Probably the third best. If you haven't watched my warrior paladin guide, let me quickly break down what we'll be going over in this video. First, we're going to break down every single skill and give you some tips and advice on how to fully utilize these skills and what you should and shouldn't be doing. After which we'll go into the rotation and opener and just break down why we're doing certain things in this opener and rotation and how you can fully utilize your kit while you're doing these openers and rotations and just make it make sense. And then after that we will move on to some dungeon examples just to fully utilize our mitigation, how we should be rotating cooldowns, just some quick dirty examples of how we should be doing stuff like that and pulling in dungeons and stuff like that. We won't be covering trials because trials are spoilers and you can pretty much apply the opener and rotation segment of the video to trials and raids, so you don't have to worry too much about that. That pretty much is covered in that part. And then we will finally finish off the video with stats and gearing. So without further ado, let us just dive right in. First, let's start off with the offensive skills, starting with our basic GCDs and moving on from there. Gunbreaker, like all tanks, have their basic 1-2-3 combo. We have Keen Edge, Brutal Shell giving us a nice little heal and a nice little shield, and then Solid Barrel, which is our combo finisher, and it also adds a cartridge to the powder gauge. This is important and we will go over the powder gauge in just a moment. Next up we have our AoE combo, Demon Slice and Demon Slaughter. Pretty basic AoE rotation here. Demon Slaughter giving us a cartridge to the powder gauge as well. Very important that we keep note of this. An important thing to note about Demon Slice and Demon Slaughter is, unlike Warrior and Paladin, we will actually be using Demon Slice and Demon Slaughter on 2 or more targets, so we don't apply that rule from AoEing. When we're playing Warrior and we're playing Paladin, we only AoE on 3 or more targets. It's actually different on Gunbreaker. We will be AoEing on 2 or more targets, so do keep this in mind. I do hate how inconsistent SE is with this kind of stuff, but just keep that in mind. As a Gunbreaker, we will be using our AoE on 2 or more targets. So now we've done the basic 1-2-3 combo and the AoE combo. Let's talk about the powder gauge. Now the powder gauge has 2 charges, but once you get to level 88 on Gunbreaker, you'll then have access to 3 charges. Each charge of the powder gauge gives you access to certain high potency damaging abilities, with the exception of one which will require 2, which we'll go over in just a moment. So let's start off with our bread and butter cartridge ability. This is the Gnashing Fang combo, and the Gnashing Fang combo can literally be assigned to 1 slot of our hotbar, and we can keep spamming it and we'll do Gnashing Fang, Savage Claw, and then Wicked Talon. These are really high potency and we want to make sure we're using this pretty much off cooldown, which leads me into continuation. Once we get to level 70, when we use Gnashing Fang, Savage Claw, and Wicked Talon, our continuation will be procced for each usage of these. So this is an OGCD with, again, high potency, and what we want to do is we want to do Gnashing Fang and then press that continuation button, and then Savage Claw, press that continuation button again, and then Wicked Talon, and then finally press that continuation button for the last time. Now continuation does have a bit more to it, but we'll go over that in just a moment. And that whole combo only requires 1 cartridge charge just to initiate the combo, so do keep that in mind. You just need 1 cartridge charge, after which the rest is free. Which leads me on to Burst Strike. Now Burst Strike again requires 1 cartridge charge and is our single target, just basically our little filler attack to use when we don't have Gnashing up and we want to get rid of a charge on our cartridge. Then we'll use Burst Strike. This also leads us into a continuation once we get to level 86, and we'll get the continuation hyper velocity. This is again just an OGCD. Every time we hit a Burst Strike, we'll then have access to continuation and we can do a little bit more damage. This makes Burst Strike just feel a lot more satisfying to do and obviously give it more damage, so this is a really good thing that we have. And then we have Fated Circle. Just like our AoE combo, we will be using this on 2 or more targets over Burst Strike, so just keep that in mind. A reoccurring thing with Gunbreaker's AoE is we will be using it on 2 or more targets. Let's move on to the last ability that Gunbreaker gets, just because it ties the powder gauge and all that so well together. Our last ability that we get with the powder gauge is Double Down. Now this is our only ability that requires 2 cartridge charges, and this is again an ability that we will be using off cooldown. But don't take my word for on cooldown, just like you literally use it when it's up. Please listen when we get to a certain part of this video, and I will explain what I mean by using off cooldown. Okay, so just bear with me, I'll just quickly explain the ability. So Double Down is a AoE on the GCD It uses 2 cartridges and it does 1200 potency and then 20% less for all the remaining enemies. This is just a fantastic ability. It's really good. Does a lot of damage. You always do want to just use this when it's off cooldown. Then we have Lightning Shot. Lightning Shot is just our ranged pull attack. Simply use this to pull the boss or pull mobs in a dungeon or pull mobs off someone who shouldn't have mobs, for example. Pretty simple stuff. So let's move on to the last GCD that Gunbreaker has, and then we'll move on to the offensive OGCDs and stuff like that. So our last GCD which we have is Sonic Break, and again, I know you might be getting bored of this, but this is something that we will again be using off CD because this is a very high potency dot and we want to keep this up at all times when we have it off CD. Now let's move on to our damaging buff, No Mercy. Now when I say use Gnashing off CD, use Double Down off CD, and use Sonic Break off CD, it ties into No Mercy pretty hard. Now, you'll use a Gnashing Fang. Your very first Gnashing Fang in the fight will be under No Mercy, and then your second one will be not under No Mercy, and then your third one No Mercy again, and let's rinse and repeat from there, if that makes sense. So, first Gnashing, no Mercy. Second one, you won't have No Mercy. I was going to say no Mercy. And then your third one, No Mercy again. Sonic Break, the dot that we have, this will always be under No Mercy, no matter what. This will make sense when we get into the open and rotation part, but just for now, remember, No Mercy, you'll always have Sonic Break for this. Same for Double Down. Double Down is a 1 minute cooldown, so we're always going to have this up for No Mercy. Under no circumstance do we not want to use Double Down without No Mercy. This is bad and it's just going to lose us a lot of potency, so we really just don't want to be making that error. Let's move on to Bow Shot, quite an obnoxious ability. This is an AoE OGCD, and it's going to put a dot on all the enemies. This is, again, a 1 minute CD, so again, we always want this up with No Mercy and never not without it. Moving on to Blasting Zone. This is simply an OGCD with a heck ton of potency. This follows the same rule as Gnashing Fang. The first one is always going to be with No Mercy, second one without, and the third with rinse and repeat. Moving on to Rough Divide. This is simply our gap closer, but it's quite an interesting one. A little bit like Paladin, we always want to use our Rough Divides with No Mercy up. Just like with Paladin, we always want to use our Intervenes with Fight or Flight up. Of course, if you know the boss is going to disengage you, then it might be worth holding on to this and then using it to gap close so we don't lose too many GCDs or damage. Just keep it in mind, it's fight dependent, but for the most part, we are going to be using this with our No Mercies. I was debating to put this in utility or offense, but honestly this is mostly an offensive ability, so we'll go over Bloodfest. Bloodfest is just a OGCD that's going to give us instantly 2 or 3 cartridges depending on level. Once we get to 88, it's going to give us 3 cartridges. And basically what we want to do with this ability is actually do it off CD. Now there will be times where you might hold it for like milliseconds, but we'll go over that when we get to the rotation and open a part of the video. So don't worry too much about that. Pretty good ability overall. It's nice damage increase. So again, I was debating to put it in utility, but honestly it's pure damage really when it comes to this ability. So that is that. Let's move on to the defensive abilities that Gunbreaker has. Shouldn't take too long because there's not a hell of a lot to cover, but let's quickly go into it. First, let's go over Nebula. Nebula is just our big tank CD, like all tanks have. Our 30% mitigation, 15 seconds, every 120 seconds. Good for tank busters, good for filler damage. Just remember, fix this into your CD rotation and you'll be good. Then we have Camouflage. This increases our parry rate by 50% and also reduces damage that we take by 10% for 20 seconds every 90 seconds. So a nice little filler CD. I do like this. I wouldn't save it for tank busters, but it's nice to just use as a filler in between when we don't have cooldowns up or anything like that. Next we have Super Blide. This is an interesting one. It's actually super good and I really think this is an amazing invulnerability, but I would carefully use this. What I mean by carefully is I would give your healer a heads up if you're going to use it. If you plan to use this in a pull or something like that, then maybe give your healer a heads up. I'll actually go over an example like this in the dungeon example of the video, so bear with me, go over that a little bit later on in the video, but for now just know this reduces your health to 1 when you use it, but then it grants you complete immunity for 10 seconds, so it's pretty much hallowed ground. It's on a shorter CD, but it more or less kills you in a way. It puts your health all the way to 1. Don't worry about too much about that, just means the healer needs to heal you up. It's pretty good overall. I do like it. I'm a big fan of Super Blide, so yeah, we'll go over that once we get to the dungeon example part of the video. Rampart. Most tanks know what Rampart is, but let's quickly go over it. It reduces our damage taken by 20%. It lasts 20 seconds and it's every 90 seconds. Really good filler cooldown, really good tank buster cooldown. Just make sure you're fixing this into your CD rotation and you're using it very appropriately. Now let's do a weird intermission between our defensive abilities and our utility abilities. So we just went over most of our defensive abilities, and then we have our utility abilities, but it also kind of ties into defensive as well. So first ability we have in our defense/utility ability is Heart of Conundrum. Now you should see the tooltip here, and it is pretty nuts. The initial cooldown is going to give us 15% less damage taken for the 8 seconds. It also grants Clarity of Conundrum, which reduces damage taken by 15% for 4 seconds. So to put this into a easier way to understand, for the first 4 seconds of this ability, it's going to basically reduce our damage taken by 30%. Then once the 4 seconds are over, it'll go back to 15% for the last 4 seconds. So first 4 seconds, 30% reduced damage taken, and then once we have passed that, the last 4 seconds will go back to 15% less damage taken. It also grants us Cartharas of Conundrum. This is basically going to put a little heal over time, but it's not really heal over time. Basically what it's going to do is, you can see that from the tooltip, but when we put this on ourselves or another player, this is going to give them a 900 cure potency when they drop below 50% or when the effect just outright expires. So a pretty nice big heal, really. And then the last little thing, when you have Brutal Shell up and you use this on someone else, it's going to give that Brutal Shell to your target as well. So that's a nice little off-tank ability. Nice little cherry on top to really finish up the ability and make it really just nice overall. So as I've explained this, you probably can gather this ability is pretty good. It doesn't beat Nascent Flash in my books, but I think it is a pretty good competitor. And honestly, this is a fantastic ability to be used on yourself or another party member. A bit like Nascent, you can actually save people by using this ability. Say if a DPS or a healer or whatever takes a vulnerability stack, they fall below 50% and the AoE is going out, you can whip this on them and it will give them that heal, and it will also give them 30% mitigation for that AoE, so it could outright save that person. And that is honestly a pretty good thing to do as a tank. And just remember, as a tank, honestly, if this is up, then it is also kind of your responsibility to protect the party and keep them alive, as much as it is the healers. If you see an opportunity like this arise, do take advantage of it. If it's not on CD and it's up, then yeah, just remember this, because you can save someone's life, and this can just make the fight go a lot smoother if you manage to get that off. Of course, practice makes perfect, and I don't expect everyone to be able to do this easily and straight away and have the reaction speed to do that, but just be wary that you can do this, and it is a good thing to take charge of and just realize that you can save someone's life, and you should if you can. Next up, we have Aurora. This is basically like just a regen. We can give this to ourselves or any other party member. It's going to cure us for 200 potency per tick, and it has 2 charges. Pretty good overall, a nice little ability to use when you're main tanking, or you can throw this on the main tank when you're off tanking. So this really makes Gunbreaker a nice little off tank addition if you do have a warrior or something like that. Again, this can also be used slightly like Heart of Conundrum. It's not as big as impactful, but if you see someone drop low, then you can throw this Aurora on them and just try and heal them up and help the healers out a little bit, if you deem that an appropriate thing to do. Reprisal, again, you probably know what this does, but it's going to reduce damage dealt by nearby enemies by 10% for 10 seconds. This is a little AoE, so it's good for raid wides, it's good for tank busters, it's good for filler damage, and it's also good for dungeon mob packs. So just keep this in mind, it's a very versatile skill, and it's every 60 seconds, so again, it's pretty good. Interject and Low Blow. Interject is our interrupt. This interrupts an enemy's cast bar. When you see that sort of red cast bar on an enemy, and not the orange and hue one, but the red one, we can use interject and interrupt it. Low Blow or Stun, this can be used to stun enemies, and it's a good tool to actually use to mitigate. Maybe use it on the biggest enemy in a dungeon mob pack and we can stun them and just reduce the damage taken. We then have Provoke and Shirk. Provoke is our tank swap and peel ability. What we do is when a tank swap is needed, we will use this on an enemy, on a boss, and we'll take the aggro. Then hopefully the other tank will use Shirk, and this will transfer 25% of the aggro they have onto us. And again, if a tank provokes off us instead, then we're going to use Shirk, and then we're going to give them our 25% more enmity. Arm's Length, this creates a barrier around ourselves that prevents all knockback and draw-in effects. Super good for when a boss is going to push us back, so we can prevent that pushback and save some damage. But it's also a really good CD to be using in dungeons and trash pools and stuff like that, because it's going to affect every enemy that hits you with a 20% slow. This is going to make them attack 20% slower with their auto attacks, and their cast bars are also going to be 20% slower. So this is just really good overall for mitigation as well. So making sure we are using this as mitigation and utility. And then last but not least, every tank has their tank stance. Royal Guard. Make sure we use this when we're actively tanking and maybe switching it off when we are not actively tanking. And again, remember, we don't have to switch this off when we've just finished the tank swap. As long as we're doing our shirk and stuff, we should be fine and we shouldn't catch up on aggro. Just if we are catching up on aggro, make sure we turn this off, as we don't want to steal aggro off our fellow tanks, because that can just make the fight awkward for everyone. And that is all the abilities and how they work and a little breakdown of all that stuff. Let's go into the opener and rotation part of the video now. Okay, so here we are on a dummy. I'm not going to talk too much into it. I'll probably let it play out. I might say some things here and there. There will be a picture up on the screen for the opener and other parts of the fight. It's pretty straightforward, but as you can see, we are using pretty much everything on cooldown in alignment with No Mercy. And then here, this is really important. What we do is we get one more solid barrel off here, and then we get one more burst strike and hyper velocity here, and we're going to slightly clip into our gnashing, unfortunately, but this is unavoidable as we want to get that last burst strike with our pot. Then we're going to spam gnashing because we want to use this off cooldown as soon as possible. And of course using a blasting zone as well. And then what we're going to do is really, we're just going to go about just doing 1, 2, 3s for a bit, making sure we're not overcapping on our powder gauge and just progressing through our rotation here. It's pretty simple. No Mercy's almost up, so we're going to do this last one, then do No Mercy late into the GCD. And then do our double down, of course, always after the first gnashing, and then our sonic break. And then we'll finish our gnashing again. And then kind of the same with the potion here. We want to get one more burst strike off and then under No Mercy there. Unfortunately, you can't get the hyper velocity with No Mercy, but you can get the initial hit of burst strike. And then into gnashing again. And we want to use Bloodfest here as soon as it's up, because this is going to help us out at the 3-minute mark. Keep going about like it's a normal rotation. Our No Mercy is coming up soon, so what we want to do is we just want to dump some of this cartridge because we don't want to overcap, do we? And then we'll finish off the combo here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go 1, 2, and then late into the GCD, pop No Mercy, and then gnashing into double down like we always do. Do our 2 GCDs after the double down, sonic break, make sure we're weaving in our rough divides, and then just finishing off our gnashing here. And again, we'll finish a solid barrel, and then we'll get a burst strike under No Mercy. Pretty good stuff. And then we'll get our 1, 2 with a No Mercy. This is the 2-minute mark again. There would have been a picture just before we went into the 2-minute mark, and it will show you basically what you should have up during the 2-minute mark and how you should be executing it. Again, Gnashing Fang is back up. We're going to be using that off cooldown again, along with Blasting Zone. And now basically the goal is to generate as much cartridge as we want, because we're nearing our 3-minute mark. Now our 3-minute mark as a Gunbreaker is possibly the strongest part of our rotation. This is where everything comes together. We have 3 charges of this gauge. And what we do is we want to use Gnashing first, into our continuation, then No Mercy, then our double down, into Bloodfest, and we want a sonic break here. I didn't sonic break, this was a bit of a mistake, but there will be a picture and you can follow that a bit more accurately. But yeah, pretty much the same as usual, but here you'll see we just do a bunch of burst strikes because the combo lasts for so long that we shouldn't be under any pressure to finish that combo. Then we'll do that for last hit the combo, get one final burst strike in, and then we're done. This is huge damage and we want to be aiming for this. Hopefully I've broken that down and made sense to you. There, you can always rewatch the video, and then you can always have a look at the marks with the infographic pictures on display here, and you'll see them and they should make sense to you. I'll also link them down in the description below, so if you want, you can check the opener, the 1-minute mark, 2-minute mark, and the 3-minute mark of your pull when you're playing Gunbreaker. I have to say a big shout out to the Balance Discord here. I would have not known to do this if I didn't look at the Balance Discord and look at the resources provided there. So if you want to check them out as well, there'll be a link in the description below. You can check them out. Really helpful people. If you've got any questions or anything like that, you can go to them, or you can ask me in the comments section below. That is completely up to you. Moving on though. Right, so let's quickly go over a dungeon mob pack here. So we're in Smarlaton, and I'm going to pull a wall-to-wall trash ball here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the healer know that I'm going to super blide. And then I'm going to, once we get a little bit low and we let ourselves drop purposely, we are then going to use super blide. And then once we've done that, we're going to, go for our standard DPS rotation here. All good. You see I popped a Heart of Conundrum there. I didn't mean to do that. It was just a fat finger. I was meant to pop Fated Circle. So don't think about that too much, please. As soon as my super blide has gone off, I'm going to pop Rampart and Camouflage here. Just combine those two. You don't have to combine those two, by all means. Do what you want, but I would always pop Rampart straight after my invulnerability has gone, because I don't want to pop Nebula yet, because I want to save that for the next dungeon pull. Because as soon as this one has finished and we've rotated these CDs appropriately, then we're going to have Nebula, and then once Nebula's gone, we're going to have Rampart and Camouflage back up. So I'll skip to that pack and I will show you exactly what I'm talking about. So as you can see, I have finished the pull off, and I'm going to pop my defensives as well, and I've popped a Nebula. That's going to last me quite some time, and roughly until my Camouflage and Rampart are back up. They are a little bit late, but as you can see, this is the beauty of Reprisal and Arm's Length. I'm going to Reprisal all these mobs and also Arm's Length. This pretty much serves as a filler defensive, and then my Camouflage and Rampart are back up, and then I'm going to go into that too. I'm more or less not taking any damage really. I'm mitigating at a pretty good level here, and I'm allowing my healer to DPS if they so wish to. And yeah, that pretty much clears up how we'll be mitigating and how we'll be doing AoE in dungeon mob packs. It's not too complicated for the AoE part. It's, pop Mercy, start AoEing away. It's not too bad. Make sure we're using double down as well. Remember, this is an AoE, not just a single target, so it is super good in AoE too. Let's now go into the gearing of Gunbreaker and the stat priority and stuff. Gearing's pretty simple at the moment. As you know, the expansion just launched and there's not too many options for gear. I will have some footage in the background just playing over of some of the vendors and stuff and the gear that we should be going for and stuff like that. It's not too much of an issue right now. If you plan to play Gunbreaker just casually, just make sure you pick up some tome gear, maybe get some of the weapons and accessories from the extreme trials and stuff like that. But when it comes to actually trying to go for the stats that we want, when it comes to Gunbreaker, we, like almost every tank, is we want to prioritize crit over almost everything else. But we also want a good and comfortable amount of skill speed. Now, it doesn't need to be too much. As long as we've got 2.44 of the GCD, then we should be pretty comfy. Now, a lot of Gunbreakers do like to go lower than this, and that is fine. This is honestly personal preference and how you feel about having a faster GCD. Gunbreaker is quite an adaptable class with how it works with skill speed, because the more skill speed you add, the lower the recast of stuff like Gnashing, Double Down, Sonic Break, and all that will be, so it will align with the skill speed. If you do plan to go lower, then don't worry too much about it. It's not too strict when that. But in my personal experience, having a higher GCD recast has just made the class for me more manageable, and I do just prefer having a higher recast, so I don't really want to go for too much skill speed personally. But if you like to be fast and you want that kind of playstyle, then go for skill speed as much as you want. It is a good stat for Gunbreaker, and it will increase your damage. Obviously, prioritize critical hit rate, as this is the best stat in the game currently, at least for tanks. After that, you can do as much skill speed as you want to a comfortable level. If you're like me, you probably won't do too much, and then after skill speed, you'll be doing determination. Of course, you want to get as much determination as you can after you're comfortable with your skill speed, and then if you can't meld anything more of that in, then what we'll do is we'll probably meld some direct hit in. We don't really want to meld any tenacity, as honestly the only people who will probably be melding tenacity are warriors, as direct hit doesn't really have much of an impact on them. But for the most part, we'll probably be melding direct hit as a filler stat if we really need to meld in some filler. But that pretty much does it for all the stats and the gearing and stuff like that. And that will conclude my Gunbreaker guide. I hope it's been as comprehensive as possible for you guys and easy to understand. And I hope you can take away some good points from this guide and apply it to yourself when you're playing Gunbreaker and playing this job. I'll be honest, I really do not like this job, but I've had fun making it. I've had fun doing the research and stuff. But when it comes to actually past this point of making the guide, I'm probably going to stay far away from it. I never really liked Gunbreaker and Shadowbringers, and with Endwalker, I honestly still just don't like this job. It doesn't feel like a tank. It feels like I'm trying to play a DPS, when in reality it's a tank. It feels clunky. It doesn't feel good to play. When you're trying to reposition bosses and you've got continuation up, it doesn't feel good at all. This is all personal preference and stuff. I know that this job is liked by some people and some people enjoy it, and I think that's awesome, and more jobs should be a little bit more open to people, and not everyone's going to enjoy every single job, and that is just how it is. But yeah, personally I find it really clunky and I just don't like this job, so I'm glad that's out of the way. But to all you gunbreakers out there, I hope that my research and stuff has been helpful to you and it can provide you some good insight into this job. If you do have any questions that you would like to be answered, do leave them in the comments below. I have done enough research to answer those questions, so if you have anything that you want to ask, leave it in the comments below. I will answer you guys. If I don't know the answer, I will find the answer for you, so do not worry about that. If you liked the video, please do give it a thumbs up. That would really help me a bunch and motivate me to keep on doing these videos, as I am really enjoying this series as a whole. If you haven't subscribed yet and you enjoyed this content, then please do consider hitting subscribe. I have guides on all the dungeons, all the raids, all the bosses of Endwalker, and I'm working on a massive guide series for every single job in Endwalker currently, and hopefully keep that all up to date. With Savage raids coming out soon, I will also be making guides on them when I clear it. I might not clear it as fast as some groups, as I am a semi-hardcore group at the moment, and I will probably stay that way for quite some time as I enjoy my group. Oh, and one last thing, expect the Dark Knight guide to either be tomorrow or into the new year. I can't promise when, but it will be before the Savage raids come out, so expect it then. And please do look forward to it if you enjoy Dark Knight. With that all said and done, if I don't see you guys by the new year, then I wish you all a happy new year, and I hope to see you then. Take it easy guys, stay safe, we out, peace.